So, welcome everybody to another Portugalist webinar on moving to Portugal, and once again joined by Sandra Gomes Pinto, who is everybody's legal expert on moving to Portugal. She knows the ins and outs of residency visas, of wills, of buying property, of just about anything legal related that comes up. And I know when you're moving to a new country, quite a few things do pop up. So today, we're excited to chat with Sandra to talk through the different ways that you could potentially move to Portugal, the ins and outs of the visas, discuss some of the changes that have happened recently. There are always changes happening, it seems, within the Portuguese residency process, so it's good to keep up with this. And also, we're going to talk a little bit about buying property in Portugal and the legal side of that. So, Sandra, before we begin the questions, perhaps you would introduce yourself to anybody who hasn't heard from you before.
Yes. So thanks for inviting me, James. It's always a pleasure to be here. My goal is to provide as much value as I can. I'm a lawyer here for 30 years in Portugal. I have been talking worldwide about investment in Portugal, visas, tax benefits, litigation, all related to Portugal. It's a good pleasure, and I'm happy again to be here. I think we share common values. And so at this moment lately, in these last 10 years, we have focused a lot. One of our departments in our firm is to help people moving to Portugal. We have a team very focused on people. We like people. We like to talk with people. We like to be of service, and we like to have a positive impact in their move to Portugal, which comprises a flawless legal process, but also many other details. So we also have a relocation team helping people with details. We just recently had a Californian that was taking medicines related to diabetes type 1. So we checked if this medicine existed here and if the Portuguese state would pay part of this medicine once she enrolled in the national healthcare system. So it's always, we have a relocation team very attentive to the details. And as we know by now, devil is in the details. So we really like to be of difference and be impactful in people's life. I think this is what I was discussing with my team. This is also our purpose. This is of course a business. We need to pay our bills, and this is to earn money, but it's also from a life perspective. This is also our purpose, and it's a meaningful work for us, for me, and for my team.
Okay, fantastic. Thank you so much, Sandra.
Yes.
It is a interesting business to be in, to see people, change their lives and do something different by moving to another country. And of all the businesses to be in, it's quite a nice one.
Yes, and I see constantly people saying that they are leading a happier and healthier life in Portugal. I just recently we had a couple of retirees, American retirees, and their children also came with them, and they said, "Oh, what a nice place! How people are so nice. Food is so nice. Food is so healthy." And so I think this impression of a nice country, of a peaceful country, where people stop in the streets and like to give some help, that don't mind to go out of their way to give a help to a foreign. And I think I assume these people were like this all over the world. So I'm still a little bit puzzled when I go to Germany and I don't know where to go to a street, and why are not people happy to stop and explain me that, and because we as Portuguese, when we see a foreigner or someone in trouble, we like to be of assistance and to be of service, and this, I think, worldwide is something that makes a huge difference. And this is also why Portugal is considered one of the most welcoming countries and one of the best countries for retirees, without any doubt. Yes.
I agree, and a few people in the comments saying that the Portuguese are very welcoming. So, yes, definitely true on that point. I see we have a lot of people from the US, US in particular, also Canada and the UK.
Mm.
Without getting into the politics of it all, Sandra, I imagine you've seen quite a big increase in the number of people contacting you from the US over the past
Yes, I
6 months or
think
so.
yes, I think especially after the elections, and we received some emails of people saying, help me to get out of here." So we and we see people dissatisfied from completely different political backgrounds and completely different social backgrounds. We've seen many people dissatisfied, saying this is not the America we knew, and also worried about public services, getting a lot of difficulties getting the FBI background check. So I've seen people very worried about what would happen to the country. I've seen people, especially the gays and the other. I see people very worried about what would happen to them. Extremely, I've seen children, parents very worried about that that they would not be accepted in the community and that they would face severe and complex situations.
That's certainly been what I've seen as well. There's definitely a huge increase in people at least looking at Portugal, if not making serious plans to move here within the next 12 months. With that in mind, we're going to provide you with all of the information you need to make that move. So we'll run through the main visas. Hopefully there'll be one in there that works for you. Obviously, we're going to cover things in a top level way, and I think the best way to really get the information you need, because it's often very personal or specific to you, is to speak to Sandra and her team. So I'll mention this a few times, but Sandra has very kindly said that the first 30 people that get in touch with her and use the secret password will be able to get a free consultation. So I'm going to share that with everybody now, and I will share it later on in the webinar as well. So before we start, Sandra, we've got quite a few things to go through here. Perhaps maybe you could talk a little bit about some of the changes to the visa process that you've noticed sort of over the last, say, 3 to 6 months.
Perhaps I didn't see any very decisive or very significant changes, but I think that there are things that are confirming to be in a certain way. So I've seen that there are specificities in the UK. The process is more formal and a little bit more difficult in the UK, and I would say a little bit less standardized than in the US. I think this is a common. I think also there is an increasing intervention of IMA in the early stage of the process. So in many D8s, IMA is increasingly being more demanding in terms of the proof of the contractual relationship with a foreign entity, the right, a declaration entitled the person working remotely in Portugal, an unequivocal proof that in the last 3 months they meet the minimum financial requirements, such as 4 Portuguese minimum wages per month, which is something like 3,480 euros per month. So I've seen an increasing demanding in terms of formalities for the D8. They are checking more and more the FBI background check. And here we notice that there is a big difference between Portugal and US. So if you smoke weed 30 years or 40 years ago in the US, it's still in your FBI background check. And sometimes it is registered, but it's not completely clear what you did. And sometimes the authorities, the Portuguese authorities, without fully understand, they just issue project of rejecting an application because they don't fully understand. And so it is important sometimes to portray things properly in the personal statement and to explain exactly what happened, and perhaps even attaching the decisions of what really happened. And also, and we have been successfully being able to do that in an instance of appeal, being able to present the cases and also attaching testimonials of neighbors, of friends, of workers, telling that this person is a good person, had worked 30 years in a company without any problems, was a person of service to the community. So we've seen that when there's something in the FBI background check, is especially important to portray it in the right way in the personal statement. But sometimes we have to overcome this, and we can do it initially directly before the embassy. And then on a second stage, we can appeal to the court and also appeal to an upper public instance. So we have several ways to appeal and several ways to react to it. But in this point, sometimes it's also important to explain the US criminal law versus the Portuguese criminal law versus the Portuguese constitutional rules. So as always, I think there's a lot of law into these, although there are lots of visa advisors that have nothing to do with law. Whenever we have a little issue, a complicated issue, it's very important really to know the law and to know the legal principles and the constitutional principles, because that makes all the difference. I think it's also important to, from a legal point of view, to prepare the clients for the appointment itself, and for the clients to know that in the appointment, in the consulate, there is the possibility to ask for 10 days if there's a lack of a formality that is not a major formality, to present what is missing within 10 days, because this is a general rule of administrative law in Portugal. And also that there is, if they intend to do any negative decision, that this should be done in writing. So, and they should have the possibility to present allegations. So this is quite important, and this is that has helped many of our clients to have this kind of input. Taking into your concrete question, I think that we have also noticed that in many cases, there is a tracking number that they give you in the consulate, in the VFS, or sometimes there has been problems with the platform to check the exact situation of the visa process, and this has been quite difficult. And we have been in constant contact with the consulate in regards to our clients. And that has been something that has happened many times in the last months. Many times we contacted the embassy and were able to understand that in some cases, the embassy had already contacted the person, but by some reason they didn't receive the email. Perhaps it went in the spam, or it was the wrong email or something. But if we had not been in constant contact and knew the consular and diplomatic entities, probably they would have lost the visa and not been able to end the visa process. So this is something that's also a tendency in the last months. There has been problems in the tracking platform of the visas. And in many cases, some clients did not receive the notice from the consulate saying that they were in the conditions to send the passport to be stamped. And if we had not contacted the embassies, they would have missed and would not be able to end the process and get the passport stamped. I think we noticed this also as an important aspect. And also, I would also add that, again, in respect to the aid, if you have a company, it's very important to present many documents in respect to the company, and also to present unequivocal proof that you actually earn the minimum amount. I'm repeating myself, but this is quite important. The minimum amount for the D8 visa. I would say
Okay.
were two important features. Yes.
A lot of information in there, a lot of complicated information, but at least people know that they're in safe hands when they're working with you, Sandra. So that is good to know. And when
It's
we talk
difficult.
about these,
Yes,
Mhm.
it's difficult to cover everything. And as a disclaimer, I know probably I won't be able to answer all the questions, but come back to me and I'll try my best to cover all the aspects that you want to be answered if I'm not able to do it today.
Well, I think even though the system can be complicated and a little erratic at times, the positive side of it is that the visas are very attainable by comparison to other EU countries. So let's start off with probably what is seen as the most attainable one, at least in terms of the financial requirements, and that's the D7 visa. So Sandra, can you give a little overview of who might apply for this, what type of income they would need, and how much, etc.?
Now, the D7 visa is for those that are passive income holders. Passive income is the income you don't have to work for, meaning rentals, pensions, dividends, interests, everything you don't have to work for it is might be considered passive income. The financial requirement is 870 euros per month, which is the Portuguese minimum wage. Prior to initiating the process, you have to have a NIF, a tax number in Portugal, and a bank account in Portugal. And this visa has mainly three pillars: the financial pillar, a proof of accommodation. This is one of the other pillars, and you have to have an FBI or criminal records clean or with minimum registers that do not jeopardize the situation, your concrete situation. Um, and so I would say, in a nutshell, this is the D7. So I will repeat, is a visa for those that are passive income holders. Passive income is income you don't have to work for, such as rentals, royalties, pensions, interests, dividends. Um, and this visa, as the other D visas, follow in many aspects the same regime. So on top to the financial means, you have to show that you have a roof over your head in Portugal, so a proof of accommodation, and you also have to show your criminal record from a substantial point of view. These are the three requirements. From a processual point of view and a practical point of view, to start this procedure, which is started in your country of nationality or legal residency, there are things that have to be taken care in Portugal, such as the NIF, the Portuguese bank account, and a proof of accommodation. These three things are things, although the process starts in your country of nationality or legal residency, you have to take care of these three things in Portugal. And in that sense, we can be of help, of assistance to the client. The other day you asked me whether it is mandatory to have started a visa to open a bank account in Portugal, and I would say no. It's possible to open a bank account in Portugal before you started the visa process. This is something that's possible
Okay.
to happen.
Uh,
Yes.
but you need the NIF first in order to get the bank account, generally.
Yes.
Would that be
Yes.
correct? Okay.
Yes.
So I guess, yeah, that sort of brings us on to a question that I can see people asking in the comments, which is about sort of time frames, like when do you get the NIF? When do you get your FBI background check and make sure that it's still valid by the time you submit? When do
Yeah,
you rent an
yeah,
apartment?
sometimes it can be a little bit tricky because, as you know, the FBI background check has for Portuguese visas 90 days validity. So, but sometimes, and in the beginning of after the elections, in some places, people were taking more than 2 months to get the FBI and to get it apostilled. Because as you know, this is also something quite recently. Before, they used to take sealed envelopes of the FBI background check or apostille. Nowadays, they only accept FBI background checks apostilles. Also, in the UK, some months ago, it was needed the acro, and they accept it without being apostille. At this point, it has to be apostille. So this was a recent change also. So this is important changes to bear in mind, but you have to know in your place of residency, you have to check how long it will take to get an FBI to make sure that by the time you get the appointment, the FBI has not expired. For instance,
Okay.
yesterday we got several appointments, and this is always a little bit random. We got for clients several appointments in new work, and we managed to get appointments early June. We were not able, there were no appointments available for Washington or San Francisco, but this is a little bit random. Sometimes it's like we try several times a day, sometimes it's in strange hours, sometimes it's strangely enough, it's easier to book appointments with a mobile than with a computer. So it's little tricks we tried at strange, and sometimes it's easier at strange hours. But yes, it's a little bit in terms of timing, as always with the Portuguese authorities. It's very difficult to give in a decent and transparent way very strict timelines. You have to be patient, and you cannot predict strictly timelines. But just imagine with the case from yesterday. So now we are in May. We are getting appointments in the consulate for early June. These persons, for sure, these clients, they already asked for the FBI and had it already apostilled. And it was, they were in by the beginning of June, they would not have 90 days after the issuance date. So this is the status of the situation. And
Okay.
after having the appointment in June, 2 months to 3 months after this date, they will stamp your passport with a 4 months visa to come to Portugal, to IMA, and to end the process. Sometimes when they stamp the visa, they give the date for the IMA appointment. Sometimes they don't give the date for the IMA appointment. And in this case, we need to get the IMA appointment for the client. And then there is this second appointment in the IMA. But I would say that the important appointment, the most decisive appointment, is the appointment in the consulate. If everything went well in the consulate, and if you have and you have updated documentation in the IMA, there should be no major problems, except if you are going to anywhere in Portugal where you might find people that do not speak Portuguese. So it's better to have a Portuguese lawyer with you by that time, because we notice again and again, as I have repeatedly told in previous webinars, we still notice that there is an unstandardized process. So just recently, and I believe I told you that we had a couple with little kids, and we've been in Lisbon, and we understood that in Lisbon they wanted the term of responsibility of the parent, and it had to be notarized by us. But then all of a sudden in Odivelas, for them it was not enough to have the term of responsibility notarized, so they asked the presence of the mother also in the IMA appointment, although the appointment of the mother herself was in another place at the same time. So we have to pick the mother, took the mother after her appointment to Odivelas, so she could sign the term of responsibility in front of the persons from the IMA. Also, something that happens again and again is that families, and sometimes with little kids, they schedule the appointments in at the same hour in different parts of the country. So we'll have to talk previously with IMA, negotiate with them to try to put the whole family in one place. Sometimes we manage to be successful, sometimes we don't manage, so we have to find alternatives, but at least we try that the kids are not by themselves, the little kids. At least at this we have
Yes.
to manage, but this is something that happens also again and again, and it's quite important to have some of the members of my team already know the persons in IMA and are used to take care of these things. Sometimes they are more successful than others because sometimes it's really hard, because I think people in IMA also have a lot of work, so it's difficult to, and they have not the best conditions to work, so sometimes it's different from everybody to work and to do their job properly, but if you know you are talking to, and if you have a good attitude, I think that that can have a huge impact. And for sure, I think our clients thank us again and again the fact that we are there for them and try to solve the situation the best way possible, and they have a final success, and they've finalized their visa in a successful way.
I can imagine. I think a lot of people initially think that moving to Portugal is a case you get your documents, you upload them on the Portuguese website, everything is exactly as you read it online. Whatever document someone needed, 6 months ago are the same ones that you will need. And they quickly find out that there's a lot of variety among the different offices, among the different processes, and there's always seems to be a surprise.
Yes, but on the other hand, I think it's one of the best visas. I don't know of any other visa that's such a good pathway to obtain European citizenship with the right to work, retire, study in any European country. So this is, and have the political rights of an European. So I think this is huge. And also, yes, because it has an easy path, the D7, as you don't need a golden visa investment to pursue Portuguese citizenship. So the D visas are as a path for citizenship as the golden visa, and even are better because people will actually reside in Portugal and so have a stronger connection with the community, which is also one of the main aspects for citizenship. So I think this is one of the best visas in Europe to obtain, to give a path to European citizenship with a country that has an excellent quality of life. And I think the big thing is leading a happier and healthier life with better food, with nice people, with peace. I think this is a major, and quality of life. I think these are the major things of the visa. I believe that sooner or later, Europe, there was a recent decision about Malta. I think the European Union will not accept that Portugal just an open door to Europe as it is. I have been saying this repeatedly, but I believe that this will happen sooner or later. That because Europe it's small, Portugal is a small country, and so there has to be a limit to the people we accept, and there have to be certain rules. So I believe the European Union will, for sure, as it's done with Malta, also impose some restrictions and turn the requirements more complex. I'm sure this will happen in the future.
Okay, well, so with that in mind, get your applications in soon before that happens. I do want to speak to you about that later on, actually, Sandra. Just more about potential changes to the D7. A few people have been worried with so many people considering moving to Portugal, whether they'll raise the levels or whether there is political concerns about the number of people moving to Portugal, etc. So I think that is something we can maybe discuss after we've done the nitty-gritty of the
Yes,
descent.
and I think this is also at this time is speculation. We don't know.
Yeah.
We don't know what they will do and when we'll do, and it's so anything I might say about this would be pure speculation, and I don't want to enter into that field because I really don't know and really nobody knows. But I think also there has been a new decision that you cannot just buy citizenship, and that but also the golden visa is residency, it's not citizenship. Citizenship is another path. Um, I think this is an important sign that this will be more and more complex, and that the European Union would create more complex requirements than it has until now. I think for sure this will happen, but we don't know the details and we don't know exactly what will happen.
Okay. There were a couple of questions from people about the apostille, what that actually means and how you get that done and what the difference is between that or notarization. So maybe you could just quickly
Yes.
explain that.
There is something called the Convention of Hague, where most countries enter into, but just out of curiosity, Canada just entered very recently. And what in this convention covers several matters, but one of the matters were public documents, how you make public documents enforceable in other countries. And it is through an apostille. So when I receive an FBI background check, still by the US is saying to the Portuguese state, this document complies with US laws. As opposed when a Portuguese document, a criminal record is apostilled, this means this document complies with Portuguese laws. And this allows the documents to travel, to be enforceable in other countries. And this facilitates the normal relations among individuals and countries, because there is this common rule saying that if there is an apostille stamped on a public document, this document complies with the laws of the state issuance that issued this document, and therefore can be enforceable in another country.
Okay, that's really helpful. And so is more powerful than simply notarized then?
Yes, and public documents should be notarized. This is the rule in Portugal. But
Okay.
sometimes, and now for the FBI, it's clear that they want it apostilled. Sometimes for a birth certificate should also be apostilled, and a marriage certificate should also be apostilled. Although in some consulates it suffices them that they are notarized. But the correct way should be to be apostille, because this is the rule in law in force in Portugal, according to the
Okay.
Convention of Hague.
And I do notice there are some Canadians in the chat as well. We've touched a lot on US systems and what's involved there, and also some of the UK. What is it like applying from Canada now? Is it the similar process to the US and UK, or is it different?
It's slightly different. It's slightly different. It varies from consulate to consulate, so you have to be the practice of each consulate. There was a consulate 1 year ago that only accepted enrollments or getting appointments at a certain time of the month. They are more demanding, and it's a little bit more specific and sometimes more picky than in the US. I would say it's less standardized, the process, than in the US. But then again, we try in the office, we try that people comply with everything possible. So we try to create a bulletproof process. And sometimes then, as a disclaimer, we say, then the consulate says, oh, you didn't need this. Nevertheless, just in case, once they asked for the mobile of the landlord. So now everybody takes in the proof of accommodation, they take the lease, the proof of register before the tax authority, the rental receipts, the number of the landlord, everything possible. Now, recently, they wanted certain notarized colored driver's licenses proof of address. Now we ask for everybody. It's not in any official list because there are many, many unwritten rules, but we try to make sure that there is no risk of non-compliance. Now, there was a place where they asked for the four last bank statements. So we also ask our clients for this. This is something we also ask for, just to make sure that the person doesn't have the risk of not having the visa approved. All because we know that there are discretionary powers, there are lots of things that are not fully standardized, and that there are unwritten rules. So we try to comply everything, and therefore we have an excellent approval rate because we are really picky and we make sure that our clients have a bulletproof process. And we try to
Okay.
make standards where they don't exist. So we try to understand what is the basic how is Canada, how is UK. In UK, Manchester is different from London. In the US, Miami is different. This would be more unstandardized than Washington. San Francisco is more demanding. Uh, be very careful with the amounts of the money orders in San Francisco, that they change constantly. So we ask our clients to bring the cashier's check or the money order. We always check what is the present value of the money order, but they may change the value without announcing in the site. So we say, once you get there, make sure that the amount is the right one, and if it's not, there is a post office nearby where you can get another money order. So we try sometimes, devil is in the details, so we try to make life easier for our clients. This is what we try to do.
Okay. It sounds complicated, but as we said, it is all worth it when you get to live in Portugal at the very end. One question that I've seen people ask is whether they can work in Portugal for let's say, a Portuguese employer while they're on a visa like the D7 or the D8. Is that written in stone? Is there a yes answer or a no answer?
This is unclear, and I might contradict myself because you already asked me this, and I said, "Oh, seen lots of people saying that you cannot work." So the D7 was created for passive income holders, so it it was not intended for people that wanted to work in Portugal. But in civil law, everything that's not fully forbidden, it should be allowed. So many, many times, also the D7 cards say strictly, then say expressly that you can work in Portugal. So I would say yes. I would dare to say yes, although this is not completely clear. There are contradictory positions. And I've seen, for instance, in Canada, they told to a D7 holder client that she could not work in Portugal. Although many times the D7 cards say expressly that you can work in Portugal. So I would say if there is nothing say forbidding expressly, that you can do it. This is
Okay.
my take on this. Although with some as always in law, it's something, it's not always black and white. There's can always be discussed. This is
Okay.
a point where there are contradictory positions.
I think that helps though to get a sense of what's possible and also to understand that there can be contradictory positions. Another question then. So one other requirement typically for the D7 and I think for the other visas then is to have health insurance.
Mhm.
Usually for well, actually, this is the question. Should it be for a year? And if so, should that year be paid up in full in advance, or could you be on a plan where you're sort of paying monthly for health insurance? And I should say, I think this is for the IMA appointment rather than the initial consulate appointment, if I'm correct on that.
I would start actually with the consulate appointment because for the
Okay.
consulate appointment you need a travel insurance. And the travel insurance, and initially what we used to do in the office is ask people to get a 1 year travel insurance that would cover the IMA appointment. The travel insurance is a health insurance with 30,000 euros coverage plus emergencies plus repatriation expenses, which are mandatory at an initial level. Now, recently, sometimes people in IMA don't want people to have a travel insurance and ask for a health insurance. So it should be a 4 month. I think to be on a safe side, you should bring a health insurance that has a 4 months validity. I think this would be the best approach. So a travel insurance for the consulate and then a health insurance for the IMA. Sometimes
Okay.
getting a health insurance with some anticipation might not be a bad idea, especially if you have some illness or some health conditions, because then the period of grace where you cannot use the insurance may end in a is before in a short term. So it might be useful for you start at an early stage for the health insurance so you can have soon a full usage of the health insurance. It depends on the each person's situation.
Okay, that is very helpful to know, and it can be confusing understanding the difference between travel and health insurance because it's easy to think, oh, they're the same
So
thing, but there
it's
is a
the same
difference,
thing.
right?
So travel insurance, it's a health insurance that also covers repatriation expenses, which are necessary at an early stage. So
Okay,
for the consulate. And so you get an insurance for the consulate and you get a health insurance for the IMA appointment. This insurance for the consulate, it should only enter into force by the time you intend to move to Portugal because it's an insurance for Portugal. So I think it doesn't make sense that is in force by the time you go to the appointment. It should only start to be applicable and enforced by the time you intend to come to Portugal because it's an insurance valid for Portugal.
okay, and
I hope
I
it's
think.
clear enough. Yes.
Oh no, that is very clear. And I assume then if you have health insurance in your own country, I see someone mentioning Medicare as a type of health insurance. That would not be valid in Portugal. You would need to have a health insurance from a Portuguese provider that works with the Portuguese hospitals. Is that
Not
correct?
necessarily. There are foreign insurance that have international coverage. So if it has
Okay.
the necessary coverage in Portugal and it has, I've seen Indian clients with insurance that have coverage in Portugal, as well as US clients that have insurance with coverage in Portugal, well as Filipino clients with international insurance that has coverage in Portugal. So you have to verify if the minimum coverage established in the law is covered, that it has a coverage of 30,000 euros, at least 4 months, that also covers emergencies. But it's possible you don't have, you're not obliged to have a Portuguese provider in terms of health
Okay.
needs.
Good. Okay. Well, Sandra, thank you very much for answering all the questions on the D7. I'm going to, before we move on to the digital nomad visa, I'm going to just post your email address and the code once again, just because I imagine people will want to get in touch with you with more specific questions, and I will be sending that out by email afterwards
There was
to everybody that
someone in
attends.
the chat saying MGen. They chose MGen. I think MGen is a good possibility, especially because it's an insurance that doesn't exclude pre-existing conditions, and doesn't have age limit. So I think it's a good option for many people. As and
Okay.
it is another possibilities. I think at a certain level, health insurance at a high level can be much of more affordable in Portugal.
And I guess another difference that people aren't always aware of when moving to Portugal, particularly coming from the US, is that there are two systems in Portugal. There's the private system, but there's also a public system which is available to residents and covers them. Nobody's going to say you don't have the right health insurance in order to get covered once you're a resident.
And I think it's very important the connection to the public health care system, and that can allow you to have a family doctor, to have participate. At this point, this might change in the future. Your medicines can be co-paid by the Portuguese state, but I always advise, as the Portuguese do, the majority of Portuguese do at a certain level, that on top of the connection to the public system, which can only be done once you have the resident permit card, that you also have a private insurance.
Okay. Let's move on to the digital nomad visa. So we talked about the D7, which was for passive income, so income you're not currently actively working for. What then is the digital nomad visa? I imagine people hear that word and they're thinking someone on a laptop working on a beach somewhere. Is that what we should be thinking of?
No, actually, the world is digital nomad visa, but can be applicable to any profession. You can be a painter in Portugal or an artisan in Portugal, but if you are being paid by a foreign entity that is paying you and allows you to work here, this is also a digital. It's for all persons working remotely, being paid by a foreign entity, irrespective of the nature of the entity or the work. It can be a labor contract, you can be a service provider, you can have your own company. So it's the form, it's a little bit relevant. You have to be being paid by a foreign entity and working remotely in Portugal, and you have to show that on average you earn 4 Portuguese minimum wage in the last 3 months prior to your application. I think this would be so. This misconception that digital nomad is only people in the tech world. No, it can be any profession. You can be a doctor, you can be a psychologist, you can be an engineer, you can be you can work with your hands, you can be an artist, as long as you are allowed to work in Portugal by your entity and are being paid by you have a professional relationship with a foreign entity that pays you. So it's you cannot be paid by a Portuguese entity, you have to be paid by a foreign entity. And in terms of financial means, you have to earn on average 4 Portuguese minimum wages. But in many, except from this, the nature of the work and the financial means, which are 4 times more than the ones for the D7, it's very important to bear in mind that the D8 in all the other aspects of the regime follows the same rules of the D7 visa. So the D8 is also a pass for citizenship. The D8 has always the same rules for residency. This is also something that happens in many aspects, except for these two, the nature of the work and the financial value that you earn on average monthly. The D8 visa follows the exact same regime as the D7. So you also need a NIF, you also need a bank account, you also need a proof of accommodation, you also need an FBI, and more or less the process follows the same procedure and the same regime, except for these two requirements.
Okay. And when you say work for a foreign entity, would that be as an employee, or could I also be a freelancer and have a contract with them?
I told you it's irrespective
Okay.
of the form of the nature. You can be a service provider, you can have your own company, you can be is as long what distinguish the D7, D8 is on one hand, you don't have to work for this income. On the D8, you have to work for it. But it's a little bit irrelevant, the juridical, the legal, professional connection or contract you have with a foreign entity.
Okay. So we have the D7, we have the D8. We know that it's 870 euros for the D7 for an individual, four times that for the digital nomad visa. What happens if you want to bring, say, a spouse with you or dependent children or a long-term partner? Do they apply on the same application, and do you need more money?
You need, if you are bringing your spouse under the main visa, you have to add 50%. And also for each child, 30% of the basic value we mentioned.
Okay.
On
So
top of the four Portuguese wages, 50% of that amount for the spouse, 30% on that amount for each child. But it's also possible if you don't have or you prefer that two spouses, they come under independent visas. And one can come under a D8 and the other can come under a D7. And one can bring one child and the other can bring the other child. You can combine this in the way that's better for your specific condition.
okay, that is very helpful to know. And then, what about savings as well? You need a year's worth of savings, would you say, for each visa? Would it be the same amount regardless of which visa you apply for?
Yes, yes, I would say yes. Although we notice they are less demanding for D8 visa because you show much more financial possibilities. But I would say that to be on the safe side, you should have 12,000 euros in the Portuguese bank account, plus 50% for a spouse, plus 30% for each child. This is not written anywhere, but this has been the practice. And so with these amounts, people have had no problem.
Okay. I guess as always, better safe than sorry seems to be the approach here.
Yes.
Um, So moving on, so we've got the D7 if you have passive income like a pension or US Social Security. We've got the digital nomad visa if you have some form of income you actively work for. What then is the golden visa, which you mentioned briefly before, and what type of person would apply for that?
So the golden visa doesn't, in contrary to other visas, doesn't oblige you to reside in Portugal. You only have to be 14 days within a period in Portugal in terms of mandatory time within a period of 2 years. So, for instance, if you cannot reside in Portugal at this moment, but you'd like to have the opportunity to have residency in Europe, this could be a good opportunity. And at this point, but this, in contrary to the other visas, the D7 and D8 doesn't require, you don't have to invest a penny in the country. Whereas with the golden visa, you have a standard investment of 500,000 euros to do. But for those that cannot reside in Portugal and would like to have a safe harbor in Europe, this could be a good possibility. And it's also important to know that with one visa, the one visa can be used for the whole family. So just imagine a family with 4 kids and a grandmother above 66. The grandmother, the kids, the spouse, everybody can come with one investment. And there are good investments. So at the same time, you can be making a good investment in a Portuguese financial entity. We work with CGD, so this is not publicity, but someone that's a credible entity. But I think it's important that if you are going to do an investment, that you have your financial advisor wherever you reside checking the security and validity of this investment according to international standards to make sure you are doing a good investment. if you are doing a good investment, I think it could be at the same day at the same moment doing a good investment, and also giving your family the possibility to have residency in Europe, and possibly also citizenship in Europe if you do meet the requirements on a later stage. So I think this could be for those that are not in the conditions to reside in Portugal. I think the golden visa could be a good opportunity. For all those that are in conditions to and want to reside in Portugal, I never advise the golden visa, because they can do it in a quicker and straightforward and with less and without investment with the D7 or the D8.
Okay, so you mentioned they're sort of quicker. I understand the Golden Visa has a bit more of a backlog compared to the other visas. IMA has said, I think going back close to a year now, that it's going to get those numbers down. It's coming to, I think, the period when it should have achieved its goal. What's that looking like now? Does it look like it'll meet its goal? Do you
I
think
think we
things are
notice
improving?
activity, and we notice that we are receiving notifications about all our golden visa processes that were for a while with the change of CEF into WIMA, they were sort of blocked and nothing happened. Now we see appointments being made, document notifications, so we see things are getting better, and we hope things will get in order, but it's not yet perfect. But there is it's much better than the scenario that we talked about in our last webinar.
Okay, well, that is definitely promising for those that are thinking about going down this route. And I think you mentioned before in previous webinars that now the point where the clock starts ticking for citizenship starts from the point of a successful application. Is that correct? So if
Yes.
you even if you're waiting a long time for your golden visa to be processed, that time is still potentially counting
Yes.
towards you being able to apply for citizenship.
If there are, in terms of citizenship, there are little doubts in, I think, and with this decision from the European Union saying that you cannot buy citizenship, I think there might be some problems in respect to some, because one of the requirements is actually that you reside in Portugal, and another important requirement is that you have a strong connection to the Portuguese community. So I think there is the possibility that after submitting your citizenship application, the public attorneys might say that if you don't have actually connection with the country because you didn't reside here and you didn't show this connection, then you might not be able to get citizenship. Let's see how also the jurisprudence will evolve in this respect. But I think this decision that we have from the European Union in respect to Malta, that citizenship cannot be bought, I think it's something that's an important thing that you have to bear in mind.
Okay,
So in
that is
many,
something.
many cases, the golden visa has been a path to citizenship, but this has been to be interpreted in a cautious way.
Okay,
Because it's not
good
automatic.
to know.
That's
Mhm.
one, because you have a golden visa investment that down the road, it's 100% sure you'll get citizenship. This might change in the future. We don't know. We have to verify how the Portuguese jurisprudence will evolve in this respect.
Okay. Um, One thing that I often see people doing is they'll look through the list of visas. They'll say, "Oh, I don't have passive income. I can't do the D7. I don't have a remote job. I can't do the digital nomad visa. I don't have 500,000 euros. I can't do the golden visa." And then they start looking at two other visas, which is the D2 or entrepreneur visa or the student visa as as a backup option to find a way into Portugal. Do you have any views on which people should go for? Is like, should they seriously consider trying to start a business and apply with a business plan and go with the D2 visa, or should they think about applying to a, say, a master's program in
I think
Portugal?
if you do want to have a business in Portugal, the D2 is a possibility, but I think the analysis of a business plan, the analysis of the type of business, there's a little bit more subjective and work in that respect. But I think this is a possibility to is a path to go. But many times the D8 is easier and it's more straightforward. And sometimes you can choose between the D8 and the D2. Also, in some cases, I think a student visa is it's a possibility, and I also think that Portugal could be also a great place to study. We've seen German students in Nova, in masters, so I think in that sense, a student visa or to learn Portuguese, that would, I think a student visa could be a good possibility. It's important to know that for a student visa, you have to be enrolled in the university, but in many aspects, it follows the same also rules and regime of a D visa. So you start in the country of legal residency or nationality. This is something, and you have to show proof of accommodation, proof of financial means, your criminal record, proof of enrollment. So it follows more or less the same regime. And then you have the IMA appointment here. So it follows more or less the same regime of the other D visas. This could also be a possibility, of course.
Okay, that is definitely one for people to look into. Sandra, we're coming up on, or we have passed the hour. I did want to quickly just ask you about the buying property in Portugal and the legal side of that, if you have a couple of minutes, just to explain what that's like, because I know a few people will be thinking about doing that at some point while they move to Portugal.
Okay, so basically, sometimes there is, in some cases, people do at first do a reservation. So they pay, especially in modern buildings, this is modern developments, they pay 5,000 or 10,000 euros to do a reserve of, so this property is taken out of the market. And
Okay.
during that time, your lawyer this can happen or not. Previously, some years ago, this never happened. More recently, in some new developments, this is the case. And this is a sort of a gentleman's agreement to take a property out of the market. Many times this amount can go to an escrow account or not. Many times this amount can be reimbursed. Once you pay, you do the reservation, your lawyer will do legal due diligence. In respect, they will check the land registry. That is a sort of an ID of the property. So if there is encumbrances, if there is litigation, if there is any problem in regard to the property, this should be in the land registry. Otherwise, it will not be enforceable against you. And then you also should check before the city council the technical data sheet of the property to make sure, and the legal licensing of the property to make sure everything is legal and correct. You also should check the property before the tax authority, and you should check the energy efficiency certificate to know whether the property is energy efficient or not, or you'll be paying lot of energy to when you are in this property. So then your lawyer may have the opportunity to do this legal due diligence, and then all, it's not mandatory. Typically in Portugal, people do sign a proper promissory contract, and this is a real contract where you establish all the details of the deal, the identification of the parties, the identification of the property, the date of completion, any conditions of the deal. It's important, we in the office, we also established that as a declaration from the seller that could be applied even after the deed, that there are no hidden defects, that there were no pollutant materials such as asbestos used in the building of this house, that there are no litigation with the public authorities or the neighbors. So there are some declarations that it's very important to establish, and there are some details that is very important to establish and can prevent major complex litigation in the future. So this promissory contract, although it's not mandatory, people generally do it. It's important to do it with a lawyer. We in the office normally include a clause where when we do the promissory contract, the seller should register the promissory contract before the land registry, and that prevents the seller from selling to a third party, which is not the norm, but it should be something that should be done. And then afterwards, there is the deed, where is the date of completion, where is the change of property and change of ownership of the property. In the deed, there is a notary or a lawyer that checks again the validity of all the documentation. And it's quite a safe process in Portugal, because you have the land registry, and the land registry with an online code gives you the situation of the property. It's an ID of the property that makes all land transactions and real estate transactions very safe. And so with the deed, there is a second verification of the legality and all the documents of the property, and the taxes are paid. So you pay the stamp tax, you pay the transaction tax, you pay your lawyers, you pay the registry. So if on top of a normal property you put 10%, you'll have at the end money left. And by the time you do the deed, immediately at the same pace, they register the property in your name. So it's quite a safe and straightforward process to buy property in Portugal at this time. But it's worth to check the documents, and it's worth you have someone drafting a decent promissory contract, and someone that is not interested in earning a commission, someone that's really independent.
Okay, that sounds like there's a lot of checks going on there. Sandra, would you say that there is a need for these checks? Do things crop up from time to time where there could be legal issues or issues with
Maybe
the
legal
house?
issues, we just were contacted by a client that bought a property and learned that the property had asbestos, so he had to do a lot of rebuilding and a lot of intervention in the property to remove our asbestos. And now we are talking to the seller, but there is contradictory position, is not black and white, whether the seller should pay a compensation for all the money. So there are things that it's better to clarify. It's important when you buy a property and do a down payment that is registered in the land property, that there is an existing promissory contract. So there are things that you have to be it's better to take care, because in 99% of the cases there is no problem, but the lawyers exist to prevent pathological situation. And if there is a problem, it's better that you are fully prepared and fully protected. So
Okay.
for most people, for middle class people, buying a property is a significant investment. So it's something that you cannot do. You have to have the proper professional assistance to do it.
I think so. I mean, that is definitely one area where it is better safe than sorry. It often is people's biggest investment. Their life savings are often being put into something like this. So you want to make sure that someone who knows what could potentially go wrong is looking out for you.
Yes, and even also to do a technical due diligence, I think could be quite important. Yes.
So with technical, which is that where you would get a survey done or something like that, or
Yes.
you'd get an engineer.
Yes. checking, yes, the property from the conditions, water status, the technical conditions of the property. I think it's quite important.
Okay, well, Sandra, this is really interesting. I think maybe at another point in time we should delve more into buying property in Portugal, maybe do a separate webinar on that. But this gives people an overview of the process. So thank you very much for that, and thank you for answering all the questions about visas as well. I've shared your contact there in the chat. I'm going to send out the recording afterwards, and share it again so that people can get in touch with you when they're ready.
We didn't cover taxes, but I
We
think,
did not cover
yeah,
taxes.
we don't, but I just wanted to say something. At this point, we have several international tax experts working with us because I think there is an open questions now that we ended the NHR. In a nutshell, with the NHR, with pensions, it was quite clear that there is an international taxation law that says pensions are taxed where you reside. Portugal, with the NHR, initially exempted totally those residing here from paying taxes in respect to their pensions. Then afterwards, people were taxed 10% if they didn't pay in the country that sourced that pension. Also, the NHR would say that the other passive income, generally, although there were exceptions, would be automatically exempted from paying taxes here. Now that after more than almost 15, 16 years of NHR, I think, especially with Americans, we have some open questions. In some situations, pensions may pay taxes here, but US still taxes them. So I think there will be the applicability of mechanisms to avoid double taxation. And in some cases, for instance, if you worked in the army and you received a public pension in the US, then a public pension should only pay taxes in the US and not in Portugal. So, but there are many aspects, because once you are tax resident in Portugal, you have to present a tax return on your worldwide income. And there are sometimes also, you should never be double taxed because there is a convention to avoid double taxation in place. But I think there are some aspects that are still not 100% clear, because also the convention to avoid double taxation is not 100% clear, and we will have to see how the tax authority will interpret certain aspects and what would be the exact mechanisms used to avoid double taxation. So I think this is a very interesting topic, and
Mhm.
in some as in other instances, we are seeing here also contradictory positions from tax experts, and especially with the US, I think that would raise more questions, because the US taxes based on citizenship and not only residency as all the other countries. So I think we have lots of aspects to cover, and it might be interesting in some cases before even people move to Portugal to look for a tax analysis to even to prepare and to make the move more efficient from a tax perspective. So I think there is a very at this point a very important topic, and I'm also curious to see when we will get the first decisions or the first mandatory information from the tax authority in this regard, because I think there's lot of important things to cover. I think we see lots of Americans now very worried about taxes, but I remind an article that I read some time ago about Californians, that they were saying we spare so much money in Portugal that's almost a sin. So Portugal is still a very high quality of living. It's still much more affordable than US, especially in healthcare. And of course, people pay taxes, but there's also another side to it. So people are entitled to go to public schools, to public universities, also Americans paying some money, but it's a much better situation going to a public university here. So even if they pay some taxes, it might be worth. And also in terms of healthcare, you cannot compare. It's much more affordable. Our clients say that they do not believe sometimes when they receive the a bill in a hospital.
Yeah, I can imagine there's quite a world of a difference between getting a bill in a Portuguese hospital and an American one. It is a good point about, you know, at the end of the day, it's what money is in your pocket and the quality of life that you have, and you have to weigh up both of those things. And you will certainly spend a lot less on things like groceries in Portugal than you would in the US. You may pay more taxes, but then you save on healthcare, you save on other things as well. So it's a
I
difficult one.
notice people are happier and healthier. I've had several clients with diabetes type 1 saying that they reduce half their insulin intake because they lead a much less stressful life.
Okay, well, we will have to have you back on to discuss more on taxes. Immediately, the comments in the chat jumped up with people wanting to know more about this. So this is something we should dive into more detail later on, because it's a confusing topic, perhaps even more so than visas.
Okay, I think so too, and it's a quite new topic with the end of NHR. I think there are many questions to be answered, and contradictory positions that and things that have to be properly addressed for sure.
Well, thank you so much, Sandra. You have provided a lot of information. I really appreciate it. I think everybody else does as well.
No, thanks for having me, and I will apologize for not answering all the questions, but you can come back to me. It's difficult to cover all the problems and all the specific questions. But thanks so much. It's always a pleasure to be part of this. James.
Okay. Until next time, Sandra. Thank you. Goodbye.